This is a lower body strength workout for your luteal phase. This is that time after ovulation, so around week 3 of your cycle, where we start to see high hormone states. So we've completed that transition from low to high hormones, and now we see both estrogen and progesterone on the rise. With that, we see a slight decline in our performance indicators. We need longer recovery times. Our time to exhaustion is a little bit shorter, and higher intensity tends to feel more difficult. We have a lower blood plasma volume, so our blood is a little bit thicker. The heart has to work harder in the same exercises to deliver that oxygenated blood. We also sweat later, so our body has to get hotter before we start to sweat. So all of these things are an invitation to shift our training mode into a slightly lower intensity. It can still be challenging, but something that is not going to deplete your resources, which right now are being allocated elsewhere in the body. So our reproductive priorities change, and with that, our training mode can too. So in this workout, we are dropping the weight selection by about 10 to 20% compared to where you might have been in the follicular phase. So you can use a set of medium dumbbells. We have a few opportunities to use both dumbbells together or a single dumbbell, so you can have those options. You can maybe have 2 pairs if you have those at home, just so that you have that ability to dial it up or down based on your needs. In this workout, we're also using an elevated surface. You want to be able to have a little bit of room on either side. So we are working step ups and the elevated hip thrust. So it needs to be something that you can rest your shoulders on comfortably without hitting a barrier with your head. So if you have a really shortened chair, you might look for something more like an ottoman or the edge of your couch, something where you can lean back and have your shoulders completely supported. We do have 2 major sets of work where we're splitting the work into single-sided exercises and then kind of a more complex symmetrical exercise. And we're bookending today's practice with that elevated hip thrust. So we'll have an opportunity to practice, to perfect the form in the beginning with a body weight version, and then we'll load that pattern to close it out at the end. This one does include advanced movement patterns. So I really encourage you, especially if these are new movements to you, to tune into the movement tutorial. There you'll get everything you need to know about how to set up these exercises to be efficient, effective, and to move safely. You'll also get different ways to scale or progress each movement pattern. So that movement tutorial is linked below, and for now, we'll get into our warm-up. This is a very quick lower body warm-up designed to prepare your hips, legs, and glutes for strength work. We're starting this warm-up on our backs, so you can start to head there now. Our first exercise will be the glute bridge. So you can start to lower onto your back. We'll start in about 10 seconds. So just get yourself into position. Let your ankles be directly under your knees. Arms are by your side. Upper body is stable. We'll begin now. Let's lift the hips up, squeeze the inner thighs, inner knees together, and come down. This can be a little bit quicker if you like. We're just pre-activating the glutes so that they're ready to work for us. Make sure as you come into that top position that you're not flaring the low ribs, but we're keeping the hip points drawing up toward the low ribs. So we're integrating the belly here. We're just here in 30 seconds for each exercise. We'll start to move into dead bugs next. So we reach arms and legs up and take opposite leg, opposite arm, extending. The key here is to focus on pressing your lower back into the mat and reaching the limbs apart. Make sure that your knees aren't coming too close to your body. They're staying directly over the hips. That'll help activate the transverse abdominis, the deep layers of the abdominal wall that support your lower body work. Last one here. And we will come up to a seated position now, alternating windshield wipers. So we're just taking the knees down to one side, moving through internal and external rotation. in both hips. So looking here for any sticky points, just kind of gathering information from your body. This is a great way to really drop into your body. What do we mean by that? It means paying attention, starting to become acutely aware of any sensations that arise. So you have that mind-body connection really strong. And then we'll slowly lift into our deep squat. So come just off the floor. Don't sweat it if your heels aren't touching down, and just slightly rock side to side. So we're in this one for about 15 more seconds, just really opening the bowl of the pelvis, stretching across the inner thighs, the groin. Over here, just a few more seconds, last 2 and 1. Now we'll open it up into our spider lunge. So hands are inside the right foot, back leg is extended. Let's twist that right arm open, really reach, keep the hips square. And then take that hand back down, open the left side. So rotating to the other side. Come down, exchange, twist it open. Reach and twist. So here, make sure that you're keeping the hips level and square. They're not coming along for the ride. And we'll switch. So take your left foot forward now. We'll open the left arm up, twist, keep the hips square. Take that left hand to the inside and open. You can press your left arm into your left knee to create that deep, deep hip stretch. Just preparing the hips for our best range of motion, opening up some space. Last one here. And we're coming now to a forward lunge with a leg extension. So start at the back of your mat. We'll step forward, extend the back leg, back to your lunge, and together. Forward, extend, back, and together. So switching sides each time into that extension and back together. We're activating the glutes here. We're working the full range of motion in that joint on each side. Excellent work. Now we're coming into a reverse lunge to opposite toe touch or sweep. Don't worry if you don't touch your toes right away. Here we're just looking to warm up the hamstrings with a dynamic stretch, stepping it back and lifting it up. You might feel your heart rate elevating just a touch. We're generating some heat, improving circulation so that your body is ready for that strength work. And switch. Switching sides now, finding that sweep. Here's a good opportunity to connect to the rhythm of your breath. So those deep diaphragmatic inhales that recruit the diaphragm and allow you to get a little bit deeper into the lungs, making for more efficient exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide so that you can get more from every rep. It's an asset, the breath. Now we're picking it up with step out drop squats. So we drop down, circle, bring the arms together, out and together. So a little bit of a burst just to get that heart rate up even more, a little bit more heat so that you're ready to move. You can take these as quick or as slow as feels good for you. What we're looking for is kind of waking the body up and getting ready. Last 2 and 1. Shake it out, shake out the arms. That is your very quick lower body warm up. And now you are ready to move. Now that you are warmed up, we will get right into this lower body workout. We are starting with the elevated hip thrust. So we'll be there for 3 rounds in that same position. We're working this first set of hip thrusts with body weight only. So you can just get yourself set up at your bench or your chair. We'll get going in about 20 seconds here. Again, if you don't have a bench or a chair, you can be working a glute bridge on the floor. You want to set up with that bench at the tip of your shoulder blades. You want to walk your feet out so that your ankles are directly under your knees. And then the head and neck are neutral. So you've got that nice neutral curve in the cervical spine. We're lifting hip bones and low ribs together. Let's begin. So we take it down and then we squeeze it up. Again, here, be mindful as you come down that you're not overarching the lower back. So we're staying integrated the whole time and really allowing the glutes to do the work. We're not relying on the mobility, the hypermobility in the lower back. As you come up, squeeze inner thighs, inner knees together and lift hip bones to low ribs. You can take the hands to the hips or by your side, so long as you're not feeling any strain in the neck. For me, sometimes I like to take the hands there just to sort of support the load of the head so that the neck isn't having to stay engaged. Especially I'm coming on the heels of a pretty intense upper body day, so this feels better in my neck today. Last one here, and rest. We have 25-second resting intervals between 50 seconds of work. We are in that longer interval during the luteal phase, slightly longer rest, but we're not hitting the high intensity, so we can get away with keeping it pretty short in between exercises, and we'll have a full minute of rest between our working sets. Let's get into position, get ready to move in 2, 1. So we lower down, really drive through the heels to lift those glutes up. So we're hinging at the hips, fold the body in half, and then lift it up. Again, the upper body is still the entire time. So that's a key point of alignment. I know for me, that was missing in my hip thrust practice for a long time. I was working the whole body, working the head and shoulders, neck and spine, participating in the movement. But really, this is an isolation move where we are targeting that hip hinge and that hip extension, that glute squeeze at the top. So we fold the body in half and then we lift it up. Again, keep that magnetizing force between hip bones and low ribs so that you're not overarching at the bottom, and rest. Especially if you have a slightly higher surface, maybe you're working on a kitchen chair or the edge of a couch. You might not be able to come all the way to the ground every time, and that's okay. You want to get just enough to load that hip hinge and then be able to press up into the elevated hip thrust. We have one more round of this going in about 3 seconds, and then we're setting up quickly for our Bulgarian split squats. So we lift it up, squeeze, and slowly lower down. Lift and squeeze the glutes, squeeze the inner knees, and slowly lower down. Again, stay integrated in that low spine the entire way down. And you'll know your body will start to speak to you right away if you're overarching the lower back. It'll show up like strain or maybe pinching, but instead we're working the glutes here, nice and slow and steady. That is our mode in the luteal phase. We breathe in as we come down and then exhale forcefully to drive through those heels on the way up. We've got 10 more seconds here. Breathing in and out, and then a nice long rest period in between. And rest. Come down, grab your weights. We are shifting to Bulgarian split squats next. We have a slightly longer recovery period here to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success in this movement pattern. So I like to start with the non-dominant side. You take one foot back. Make sure that your knees are more or less in alignment side to side in your starting position. You've got your shoulders directly over the hips. You've got light weight in that back foot. You're on the shoelace side for more challenge. If your surface is a little bit lower or you want to take some of the pressure off, you can be on the back toes. And we'll be here in the split squat. So we take that knee down and drive it up. With the foot flat, it's here. We sit it back and down and drive it up. So I want you to imagine taking that lifted thigh back, sitting into a chair like you're trying to sit back onto that bench, and then driving through the front heel. We've got about 30 more seconds to set this up. What I like to do as well is mark the position of my standing foot just with a fingernail on the mat so that as we switch sides, as we come into new exercises, we can come back to that strong starting point very quickly. We've got about 10 more seconds here. We've come into position, that back foot nice and flat. Roll the shoulders up and around, and let's begin. We take it back, sit it down, drive through that front heel to come up. You have a lighter weight range in today's workout, so you should feel the work, but without the intensity. So it can be challenging, but we're not looking for that breathless zone where you're really straining to keep the breath through the nose, but it should be this slow, steady pace the whole way through the interval where you feel like you could carry out this pace for a much longer period of time. We're here for just under 20 seconds left. Drive through that front heel. Make sure that your back foot is free to move, so you're not really forcing that foot into the elevated surface, but it's got very light weight there. 2 and 1. Switch it out. So we're coming into the second side in about 25 seconds here. Again, just allowing yourself a few deep breaths, that space to recover. Please reserve the option for switching down your weight, maybe dropping to a single dumbbell or lighter loads if you start to feel the intensity creep up, especially with this single-sided work. Let's begin. Sit it back and drive it up. As you switch to side 2 now, can you feel the difference between your dominant side and your non-dominant side? These little pieces of information that let us know kind of where we have opportunities for creating more balance. We are building our unique balanced body with every session. Every little bit of strength work helps to correct postural imbalances and drive that state of equilibrium from side to side. We've got just over 10 seconds left. So again, imagine you're sitting back into a chair, taking that lifted knee straight back and then straight up. Last 2 and 1. We're coming into our curtsy lunge with a straight leg deadlift next. So again, we're just alternating sides with that straight leg deadlift in between. Enjoy a very deep breath in and let it out. So I'm coming to you from around day 19 in my cycle. We'll go in about 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, curtsy lunge. So day 19 for me and deadlift is when I start to feel the significant shift, when I start to feel things move into high hormone states. I start to see all those signals from the body, and it's that opportunity to slow things down. So a previous version of myself would push through these leg days with the same weight and the same effort, and it would feel so much harder, and I would have a really hard time coming back from my workout during the rest of the day. It would sort of take me down to 0 just through the workout itself, so that I had very little left in reserve. Last 2 and rest. Coming to Bulgarian split squats again, round 2. But now, knowing the physiology, what's going on under the hood during the luteal phase, there's so much benefit in slowing it down. So we come into position, set up your Bulgarian split squats. And it's not that it has to be easy. This work is not easy. Let's begin. But it is not depleting. Instead, it's a way to keep in that replenishing zone where you're getting energized by your workouts and not completely wrung out. Breathe in and out. When we're in the endurance zone here, we're looking to strengthen existing muscle fibers. So we're not in the business of building muscle necessarily in the luteal phase, but we're working to preserve the muscle that we have, because in the long run with our performance arc, if we can maintain our muscle in the luteal phase and not enter that cycle of muscle wasting and fat storage, then we'll make progress cycle over cycle and rest. So our cycles can be accretive. They can build on one another rather than experiencing a little bit of a setback in the luteal phase and then having to make up for lost progress. Instead, we get to grow with each passing cycle. And that means dialing it back a little bit, which feels so much better in this high hormone state. Let's begin. Take it back Drive it up. So shoulders directly over the hips. You're sitting back into that chair and then driving through that front heel. Find your balance and be here. We breathe in and out. So you should feel that slightly labored breathing. You know you're working. We are targeting the larger muscle groups in the lower body. So your heart rate will go up, but you don't want it to be out of control. These workouts can be strong, can be challenging, but they don't need to take your breath away. You should be able to keep that slow, steady rhythm throughout each interval. Last 5 seconds here. And then we're moving to our curtsy lunge. Rest. You can set the weights down in between. Roll out the shoulders here. We're coming into, again, that curtsy lunge with the straight leg deadlift in between. We will go in about 10 seconds. Grab your weight. Let's count it back in 3, 2, and 1. So it's that curtsy lunge, nice and slow. Come through center. Load the spring, fold the body in half. Drive with some power through the heels. Curtsy lunge, come through center, and hip hinge. So I can feel, even with a much lighter weight range than I was using just a week ago in a previous phase, I am finding that labored breathing, finding that work, that struggle point. And what that means is my body is a little bit different in terms of my metabolic pathways. So we're working slower metabolic pathways, meaning it takes you a little bit longer to get going. And we have lower rest blood plasma volume. So your blood is thicker, and every pump of the heart requires a little bit more effort to deliver that oxygenated blood to your working muscles. So every rep is likely to feel just a little bit harder. So we drop the weights a little bit, we slow down our pace so that we can be in that sustainable working zone. Let's begin. Bulgarian split squat. Take it back, drive it up. This is our last round. Make these strong and steady. Take it back and up. We got this. Down and up. So we're breathing in and then driving it out. So with that change in blood plasma volume, the breath becomes such an ally, such an asset to your practice. The more that you can breathe deeply in through the nose, get into the deeper chambers of the lungs, the more oxygen you're delivering with every inhale. And then the more that you can elongate that exhale, the more exchange you're getting, oxygen for carbon dioxide. So the more efficient you can be with your breath, the more you will get rest out of every rep. That deep breathing can also help kind of balance the sympathetic drive that we get from high hormone states. So with progesterone and estrogen elevated, we're already prone to being a little less resilient to stress. There's more sympathetic drive at the baseline from hormones. So let's begin. We want to work on things like the breath, work on dialing in our stress, addressing acute stressors, and helping the body metabolize that stress. So in a workout, you're naturally going to have that little bit of a stress response. You're creating a stimulus that your body has to respond to, but we can help it stay below a threshold. So we can help it stay in that effective zone where we'll get the benefits, sort of a net positive from the stress, as opposed to workouts that are going to stress your body out. So that means that slower breath rhythm, that lower intensity, and moderate pace. And rest. Set your weights down. Coming into our final round now of the curtsy lunge to that straight leg deadlift in between. Catch your breath. Roll out your shoulders. In about 10 seconds, we'll finish out this set, and then we'll have a nice long recovery period before we get into our next set of work. Let's go in 1. Here we go. Step it back. Come through center, hip hinge, nice and slow. Come through center, lower it down, and back. So here, you can tell I'm intentionally slowing the pace to get back under that high intensity threshold. So I want to stay in that endurance zone where breathing is labored but not gasping. So you can breathe nice and steady in through the nose. You might have to exhale out the mouth to release heat. But find that rhythm that works for you. If you're using very light weight or body weight only, you might be at a quicker pace, and that's totally okay. Rest. Coming into our longer recovery period now, give it a bit of a stretch. You can come into standing figure 4 to stretch the outer glutes, alternating sides here. And then we'll come into our step down. So this one, we're adding weights to this movement pattern, and we're driving that strong step up. So we're in the side position. Legs are still parallel. Your knees are both facing forward, but we're lifting up into that standing position. And then here's the key. We lower it slowly down, tap the toes, and lift it up. If you need to, you can come down all the way between each rep, get your balance, and then come right back into that slow step down. So that descent, that working against gravity, that's where we're targeting that standing glute for stability, control under tension, all of these advanced muscle engagement cues that can help us grow stronger. So you'll grab your weights. We'll move in just over 10 seconds here. So you can come into position, get that foot on your elevated surface. Again, knees are tracking straight ahead, legs are parallel. Let's begin. Step it up. Find your balance and slowly lower down. Tap the toes and drive it up. So it's that slow lower and then a quick up. It's just like the hip hinge. Think of loading the spring and then releasing it. So we come down, gently tap, and then rise up. If you need to, you can reset at the bottom and come right back in. Nice and slow. Tap the toes and drive through that heel. You should feel this in that standing glute. You want to keep the shoulders over the hips as best as you can. Just the nature of this movement pattern, your torso might have a slight forward lean, but we're staying in that squat key movement pattern, so not a hip hinge. And rest. Shake it out. So I'll be turning my back to you just for this second side to keep from having to adjust the bench too much. So we'll go in about 10 seconds. We've got that step up and a slow step down. Remember, focus on the descending part of the move. Let's go. Now we lift it up and then slowly lower it down. Find your balance. Tap and extend. So we load the glute and then release. You've got it. Resist gravity here. You can even give a count to that release, to that step down portion. Maybe 3, 2, 1, and then 1 on the way up. 3, 2, 1, and drive it up. 3, 2, 1. I find sometimes that counting just gives you another way to slow it down, especially if you're like me and you have a tendency to rush through the challenge, especially that very challenging phase of the movement as you're descending. And rest. Come out. Front squat to alternating stagger squat is next. So we've got the weights in that front rack position, or you can have a single dumbbell in the goblet hold at your chest. We'll go in about 10 seconds, starting with the front squat, and then we'll just step one foot directly back on the toes and come into a staggered squat. Let's begin. Squat it down, drive it up, step that opposite foot straight back, staggered stance, come down and to center. So we squat, front squat in the middle, then we step that opposite foot straight back. So you're keeping the same distance between the feet. You're just staggering that stance. It can be a little or it can be a lot, depending on the mobility that you have, the range that you have to flex that back knee. Doesn't take much of a staggered stance to feel the change in the loading pattern. So this is kind of taking the squat to the next level, where we're working on conscious mind-muscle connection, rest, and that additional awareness that allows us to load that front leg just a little bit more heavily. So it's that uneven loading pattern that will help us get stronger. So we're going in about 10 seconds to that step up. Again, I can feel my heart rate climbing. So I'm going to drop down to a single weight for this set. And let's begin. If you do that, just make a note in your workout log or in the comments. Make a note of where you modified, where you had to change. Lower down. That can be a way to map your cycle. You can track the cycle day and how you felt during your workout. It's a good indicator of what's happening with your inner chemistry. Slowly lower down and power up. So resist gravity and then lift it back up. Nice work. Stay slow and steady. So I can feel now my breath coming back to that more manageable zone. We're here. 4, 2, and 1. Slowly step down. Be careful as you transition out of that step up and step down pattern. And we'll get ready to go to the second side. So very deep breaths here. Again, just checking in with yourself every step of the way, where your breath is, how you're feeling. And we'll begin on the second side. Now, 2, 1. Let's step it up. Get your balance and slowly lower it down. Tap the toes and drive it up. So it's that slow lower and that quick release. You got it. Find your balance. You might notice with the single-sided work in the luteal phase, when we have more interference from hormones, that your balance could feel a little bit off. And rather than getting discouraged or frustrated by that, when you know the reason, you know that there's a primal purpose in that shift, it's a little bit easier to be compassionate with yourself and to work through those little moments of wavering in your balance. Nice and slowly lower and lift it up. We're here for 3, 2, and 1. Slowly step down. 25 seconds to rest here. And then we're coming into front squat to alternating staggered squat. So again, in that staggered squat, you're simply sliding one foot slightly back, staying on the toes to come into your squat position. Big breath in and a slow breath out. Front squat. Here we go. Take it down, squat, stagger the stance, and squat again. Come back to center. Front squat, other side, stagger the stance. You got it. So find those nice steady breaths in as you come down. Slow exhale as you come up. Stagger the stance and breathe. So again, like I mentioned, I am on day 19, which I have a slightly shorter cycle after I had children. And as I'm getting a little bit older, my cycle has shortened by a few days. What that means is day 19 for me is right in the middle of high hormone territory. So this is where the true work of cyclical alignment begins. And rest, where you get the most return for your investment being that dialing back of intensity, those conscious shifts. So again, there was a time where I would have pushed through, stayed with 2 weights from start to finish, and felt terrible. But today, I'm switching to a single weight. Again, let's begin. Take that step up and slowly lower down, working the skills and the mechanics as opposed to the force. So this is part of being in the flow and being less in the force where we're overriding our body's signals for the sake of consistency or for the sake of a workout looking a particular way. Instead, we're focusing on how we feel, how we want to feel, which are far more powerful indicators of what's working and what's not. Drive it up and slowly lower it down. This is the endurance mode. It's not super intense, but it is steady. And rest. Switching sides, coming to the second side. This is our last round of these step downs. We just have our elevated glute bridge coming up after this set to finish it out. So we'll switch sides now. Apologies for turning my back to you. The sound quality should be preserved. And let's begin. So we drive it up quick and slowly lower it down. Drive it up, extend, and slowly release. Keep the shoulders and chest elevated. So avoid that tendency, especially as you get tired, to really lean too far forward. Instead, we're staying controlled and aligned all the way down and all the way up. Again, lengthening that descent as much as you can, down and up. You got this. This is our last round of these step downs. They are so much more challenging than they might appear, especially when you load them with that slow and steady pace. And rest. Last round of our front squat to staggered squat coming up next. So you can get your weights ready, shake it out for a few seconds, big breath in. After this exercise, we have that nice long recovery period so that we can finish strong and steady with our last exercise. Come into position, front squat. Let's begin. Take it down into that squat. Slightly stagger the stance on the back toes and squat again. Come through center, front squat. Load the toes in the back and come down. Come through center, front squat. You might also see the staggered squat happen with the front toes up, but for me, I find that alignment, that form, a little bit more challenging for the knees. So I like to lift the back heel instead. Come up, front squat. Lower it down. Drive through those heels, slide it back, and lower. We've got just about 10 more seconds left. Get a few more quality reps. Don't worry about speed here. And rest. Excellent job. I'm going to set the weights down on either side of my mat, getting ready for that elevated hip thrust, but make sure that you're guiding your heart rate back down in this recovery period before we come onto the floor. So you might be in a nice slow twist, side to side, maybe a reach, really extending the sides of the waist in that stretch. Maybe some cat-cow to free the low spine, especially in preparation for these hip thrusts. You can even straighten alternate legs, come into this nice deep hamstring stretch. Your hamstrings doing a lot of work with the glutes today. So again, in the luteal phase, we do have longer recovery periods from super high intensity, but you might find that in these lower intensity zones, you come back down pretty quickly. I feel pretty well recovered now in just a short period of time. So we'll come into position for the elevated hip thrust. Again, the edge of that surface is at the tip of your shoulder blades and you're not overarching the lower back. So don't worry about coming all the way to the floor, especially if your elevated surface is on the high side. Let's go in 3, 2, 1. You've got those weights in your hip creases. We're pressing up, lower down, just enough to get the hip hinge and come up. So again, we're not looking for that full hip hinge all the way to the floor, but instead it's just enough to load that key movement action and then extend the hips up. Again, head and neck are neutral. Upper body stays still the entire time. The weights can be on your hip bones or your hip points or in the hip creases like I have if you have two weights. And we're driving through the heels. Make sure you have that force, that pulling of the inner knees, inner thighs, like they're hugging to the midline, but almost like the same side of a magnet, they repel each other so they stay in that parallel alignment and come down. Rest. You can set the weights off to the side. Enjoy a few very deep breaths here. So we're staying slow and controlled with these reps, really focusing on form. That is the key work for the luteal phase. We sort of have this nesting quality. 3, 2, and 1. So it's a good opportunity to audit your form in these advanced movement patterns so that you can come back even stronger when you use them in the next cycle. You can pick up on little nuances that are harder to see, harder to perceive when you have heavy weights. So in this lighter weight range, we can work on our form. We can see what happens when you lift the toes, for instance, or how does it change when you drive through the heels? What happens if you imagine a block or a ball between your inner knees that you're trying to squeeze? What happens if you lift the hip bones toward the low ribs? All of this information, all of this structure, 3, 2, 1, is available more readily when we have lighter loads. We have more reserve bandwidth and resource to pay attention to these little nuances. Something I love about the luteal phase. It's slightly easier to drop into that moving meditation because you have more entry points for your awareness. Last 3, 2, and 1. Let's take it up. Lift and slowly lower down. Come just enough to hinge at the hips, to load the legs, and then drive it up with some power. So we inhale, exhale. If your neck gets sore at all, you can drop the weight or drop to a single weight and start to support your head with the hands. Otherwise, keeping that neutral cervical spine where the chin is not tucked or lifted, but it's in that nice straight position. We've got just over 15 seconds here, squeezing it up and lower down. I know your glutes are starting to speak to you, especially now that we're loading this pattern. We've got just 5 more seconds left. Let's get it. 3, 2, and 1. Slowly come out. You can set your weights off to the side. And we will make our way very slowly back to a standing position. So again, you're more sensitive to blood pressure shifts in this phase because of that increase in blood thickness or decrease in viscosity. So I like to come step by step, come into a forward bend position with the knees bent first, and then hands to thighs to slowly roll all the way up to standing. That is your leg day strength work for today. And now we will shift into our cool down mode. You have just wrapped up your lower body strength work, and it is time to show those legs and glutes some love. So make sure that you're breathing, your heart rate has come back down to more or less a baseline, maybe just slightly elevated. If you need to, you can enjoy some more gentle dynamic movement until you get to that place. Because for now, we're coming into some more static stretches. So I'll get our timer going. And in about 10 seconds, maybe roll the shoulders. We'll come into a very deep squat. So you can turn the toes slightly out, the heels slightly in, and we will lower down into this nice deep squat. So as low as you can go, and then we're simply going to rock side to side. So lift one heel and then the other while keeping the chest elevated here, really creating that broadening across the bowl of the pelvis. So nice deep squat rocks here. Don't sweat it if your heels don't quite touch the floor. You can be in a slightly higher elevation, but it's nice to go deep because you can take some of that load off. Our next movement pattern is the forward bend. So we'll straighten the legs, but keep that slight bend in the knees, whatever feels best for you. You can keep your head and heart level with the hips for now. And again, just swaying the hips side to side, pedaling out the feet. Nice and easy, opening the backs of the legs. Breathing slow and steady throughout here. And we'll be here just a few more seconds, and then we'll start to transition to a lunge on the right side. So we'll turn into our lunge position, let the back knee come down, reach the arms nice and high. Feel that lengthening of the back hip flexor and side bend. So left arm reaches up and over to the right. Keep the shoulders relaxing away from the ears. You can really anchor that back shin into the mat so that you can feel that stretch, that traction along the hip flexor. Then we'll reach both arms up once again. This time take your left hand to the outside of right knee and twist open. So we're hugging the inner thighs to the midline and giving that nice deep twist here. As you come back through center, bring the hands to the inside of that right foot, come into your low lizard lunge, and then roll it back to straighten that leg. So we're rocking forward and back here. Super slow, super sweet. Just very gently kind of encouraging some space into the inner thighs, the backs of the legs. Last big breath here. And begin to kickstand your back shin. Come into this half warrior two or gate pose shape. And again, we're rocking. So this is sort of the dynamic nature of what might otherwise be a very static stretch. We're adding just that little bit of pulsation, that little bit of movement to kind of send the signal to the body that it's okay to relax. The workout is over and it's okay to kind of step it down. We're rocking here, and then we'll switch sides. So bring your opposite shin down, take the other foot out, and again, rock side to side. So we're getting that nice broadening across the bowl of the pelvis, dialing that knee open to feel that solid stretch in the hips. Continuing to breathe slow and steady through the nose here. And then after this, we will switch to our lunge sequence on the second side. Let's start to head that direction now. So you can parallel your back shin. I like to untuck the toes just to get access to the hip flexor. Arms reach up. And then we take left hand to left hip, right arm up and over. Really anchor through that back shin to feel the elongation, the traction on the front of the back thigh. Come up through center, both arms reach. We'll take right hand to the outside of left knee, circle the left arm back and around for a twist. Shoulders directly over the hips here. Squeeze the inner thighs to the midline to leverage a slightly deeper twist here. Big breath in and a slow breath out. Circle the hands back down and around to the inside of that left foot. Again, here we're rocking between a deep lizard lunge and that half runner stretch. So really lengthening the hamstring, coming forward, lifting the heart, and then a slight round in the spine if you like, sort of like cat and cow spine, just to articulate the bones here and release tension. Last one. And we'll transition to a seat in your own way here. We'll cross left ankle over right knee for seated pigeon pose. So pressing onto the fingertips, lifting the heart, belly, chest toward that front shin. And again, that gentle rock, just side to side here, slow and steady. You might be in a more static approach. If you find a sweet spot that feels really good, you might choose to stay there a couple extra breaths. Really keep the shoulders relaxed away from the ears, and we'll switch sides. So cross right ankle over left knee, again lifting heart, belly, chest toward that top leg and getting that gentle rock side to side. So whatever feels best in your body, maybe you like that static stretch a little bit better, or maybe the movement feels good. Keeping the shoulders nice and relaxed. So we are coming to the end of our cool down now. Hope you're getting ready to head into your post-workout recovery fuel next. We'll be here just a few more seconds and slowly come out. So transition in your own way from this seated position, nice and slowly roll up bone by bone all the way to standing. Let's enjoy a huge breath together. Inhale and exhale, sigh it out. that completes your session for today. I hope that you feel invigorated and energized, ready for whatever comes next in your day. And I want to take this opportunity just to thank you. Thank you for showing up for your cyclical self-care. Thank you for sweating with me and for letting your body be moved.